Hello. Welcome to This Week in Politics. Now, today's program, I want to take kind of a step back and let's look at some of the common threads that are running through some events that have happened. We had the shooting in Texas, the shooting in Florida, the Las Vegas shooting. Let's take a look and see what they all have in common. Now, I started thinking about this because of a guy named Ole Demigard, and you can Google him. He's got a lot of very interesting videos on YouTube, and some of it's hogwash, but I think some of it he is on something and onto something. So I took that and I started just thinking about what things we do know, we can know from all of these events and what they have in common. Now, let me start by saying I believe most of the major events, and I don't mean all of them, some of them are just whack jobs, but most of these events, I believe, are being orchestrated uh, by and contributed to, protected by, set up by, researched by, and with the full consent of a part of our government. And the part that is doing it for their own purposes, whatever those purposes are. I think there's many different purposes. I think one of them is to get the Americans so wore down that they'll voluntarily give up their guns. I think I think part of it is a money making opportunity because I think there are people that will pay money to do things like kill people. Um, I think also it's a place for um, if I were a gangster and I needed to get rid of a body, uh, these shootings would be a good way to do it in front of everybody, but nobody would know. So I believe a lot of other things, but I just wanted you to know where I stand up front so that as we go through these, I'm going to go through and make my case and let you decide. Now, after every event, we hear about gun control. Okay. And the legislators all want to jump in and write laws to lessen our rights of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment does not say that we need to have a license to have a gun. It doesn't say that we have to um, do anything. It says we have a God-given right to own a gun, and we do not need the government's approval to own a gun. We don't need the government's licensing or testing or waiting periods. The Constitution doesn't say anything about that. But they, piece by piece, inch by inch, over the years, they have taken away a lot of our gun rights, and this will continue until uh, we voluntarily give up our guns. But gun control is not going to stop a criminal. Even if you could wave a magic wand and get rid of every single gun in the country and nobody had them, if you could do that, criminals will just go to knives. What are you going to do then? Get rid of knives? I mean, they're going through this in Britain right now. You know, if a criminal wants to do a crime, they're going to do a crime. And if they want to kill somebody, they're going to kill somebody. And if you don't have a gun, then they'll use a knife. If you take away the knives, they'll use bombs. If you take away the bombs, they'll use cars. If you take away the cars, I mean, at what point do we have to say it's not the guns, it's stupid people? I meant stupid people. So creating more laws is not going to stop a criminal. Taking away guns is not going to stop crime. If whoever is doing this wants to add more laws to stop the shooting, I want you to think about the logic of that. In every instance where these shooters have gone, they have broken a myriad of laws to get to the point where they are. Do you think one more law is going to change it? You know, it's kind of like, if you owned a business, would you really want to put a sign on the door that says no guns are allowed in here? I mean, if I'm a criminal, that's where I'm going because nobody in there's got guns. The logic never ceases to amaze me. I think gun control laws is an excuse to neuter America. And what do I mean by that? I mean, let's think back just 2 years. In 2 years, remember how weak our country appeared? Obama did nothing when he was in office. We have the strongest, most capable military on the planet. And Putin, who is basically nothing on the world stage, manages to take over a country, and Obama shakes his finger at him. Are you kidding me? But this is the agenda of the far left. They want to neuter America, take away our power, and not just military power. They want to take away our financial power. And Obama came right out and said that. Our best days are behind us. Get used to the new normal of 1% growth. I mean, and he was fine with that. He had gone down the road. He had socialized our businesses to take away their power. He socialized medicine to take away their power. The far left's agenda is and always has been to neuter America, take away our power, and give it all to the federal government. And in the pursuit of that, taking away our guns is one of the things they want to do. I believe these things started in earnest with the killing of JFK back in '63 and have escalated. I think that was the beginning of the deep state taking over the running of the government. And I think Bobby Kennedy was an extension of that, and also a message to other people that they were in charge. Um, and I think Martin Luther King was also used as an example by the federal government. So let's think about, what do these events have in common? What Las Vegas, Florida, and Texas, those three events, what did the shooter have in common? I mean, we have three different shooters, okay? The age wasn't the deal, but they were all males, okay? They were all loners. They all had psychological issues. They were all on some type of psychological drugs. when they went to commit these things, they did it away from their homes, and they left detailed information in their homes, kind of like a suicide note. They were a cast out or cast off of society. Now, you say, well, the guy in Vegas wasn't a cast out, wasn't he? I mean, he spent most of his time by himself. I mean, gambling, but by himself. He supposedly had a girlfriend that was in another country at the time. He was a cast out. If you look at his family and you look at him, he was a cast out. And here's one that I don't think anybody has covered in any degree. But in all three of these events, there is a main player that has connections to the FBI. Out in Vegas, the sheriff used to work for the FBI. In Florida, that sheriff down there used to work for the FBI. Also in Florida, the shooter's father used to work for the FBI. In fact, one of his positions was to line up actors for false flags. I mean, that was his job. Down in Texas, the FBI was connected down there through the shooter. I believe it was one of his parents had connections to the FBI. No, I'm wrong about that. It was the police down there had connection to the FBI. That's who it was. It was the police. But I want you to think about, what are the odds? Let's take another occupation. Let's say, I don't know, banker. What do you think the odds are of me being able to go through and take a list of the top 5 players in any one of those events and finding a banker on all 3 lists? Or a race car driver? Pick an occupation where there are as many employees there as there are in the FBI. Like utility worker. What do you think the odds if I took the top 5 players in all 3 events, and I listed the occupations of all 5? What do you think the odds are that I would find a utility worker on all 3 lists? Very slim. But yet, if you took a list of the top 5 players in all 3 events and listed their occupation or their history, every single event has at least one and some 2 or 3 connections to the FBI. It was rumored that the shooter, well, it wasn't rumored. It was a fact that the shooter in Vegas used to work for the CIA and the FBI as a contract employee. What are the odds of that? So each one of these events, in one way or another, are connected to the FBI. That is not open for debate. That is a fact. That is very, very telling in and of itself. So we know what the shooters all have in common. Let's take a look at what the shootings themselves have in common. Each one of these events had a drill right before. Now, I have not been able to prove the one in Texas had a drill before it, but I think I could make the case. We know for a fact that there was a drill in Vegas, and we know for a fact there was a drill in Florida. And here's why I'm 99.9% sure there was one in Texas. Number one, between the time the shooting started and the shooter got off 20 shots, he was arrested. That means that somehow the cops found out, dispatched police, the police got there, found the shooter in the building, and arrested him, all in the time that guy got off 20 shots. You know the odds against that? Unbelievable. The cops were already there. Also, within the first hour, ATF was there and alerting everybody that they had found multiple explosive devices, of which some were CO2. Okay, so they have an active shooter. He's arrested almost instantaneously, and somehow or other, in the hubbub of the people being killed down there and arresting the shooter and dispatching the police and the appropriate vehicles, which were all Johnny on the spot, somebody manages to find multiple explosive devices, including CO2 bombs, and calls the ATF, and they have people on the ground at the scene within an hour. That is impossible unless it's planned in advance. And one last thing, I tried to go back and find it, but it had been taken off my webpage. But the morning that happened, within just a couple of hours after the news broke, one of my friends on Facebook who lives down there gets on and says, okay, somebody's going to have to explain this to me. The school issued a notice, an email notice, saying that there had been a shooting down there, which was true, but the email was sent 1 hour before the shooting took place. Now, if that isn't a telling sign, I don't know what is. And the fact that I couldn't go back and find it tells me a whole lot. So they all have drills. I believe I can say that with impunity. Another thing they all have in common, there is no proof given of the narrative that comes out ever. I mean, let's take the Vegas shooting. Has there been any ballistic reports given in any of the three shootings? Has anybody come out and said, here's the ballistic reports, here's the bullets taken from these bodies, and they match this one? Has anybody done that or seen that? I haven't. We know there's been injured people. We know there was dead people, but we don't know that what guns they were killed with. We're just taking their word that one gun shot those people. All three of those places were loaded with cameras. Have you seen any camera proof that those guys did the shooting? I haven't. And I watched very closely. The cameras in Vegas, the sheriff's department shut that right out, and we will never see that video. The shooting in Florida, there was an ex-cop down there. Again, I went to try to find the video, and I can't find it. but he used to work there, and he knows where all the cameras were, and he did a video showing you where the cameras were, there should be all kinds of video of this guy shooting down there. Nothing. We haven't seen anything. Haven't even heard anything. And again, the school in Texas, video all over the place. Haven't seen one. No ballistic reports. No DNA reports. No reconstruction videos. No forensic proof at all. None. And it should be basic stuff. I mean, the ballistic report on any shooting is customary, and they have to keep the proof. That means they have to keep, bullet A came from body A, bullet B came from body B, and here's the gun that the shooter used, and here's how they match up. That would be proof. Haven't seen it, never will. Why? The video. We know that there's video in all three events, and we haven't seen it, and we're not going to see it. The one in the shootings in Vegas and Florida, the sheriffs told us that we're never going to see the video. Why? Why is that? My opinion is because if we saw the video, we would know that these people probably did not do this shooting, or they didn't do it alone. In fact, if you do any research at all on the Vegas shooting, 90% of the people say they heard shooting on the ground in the shooting area. There were shooters on the ground, not up in the hotel. If you go back and watch the video of interviews at the kids in Florida, you will find there was an interview done by a girl, and as they were leaving the school building, the shooting had been done. The kid had been arrested and taken out, and she said from the other side of the school building, she heard more gunfire. 2 shooters? Show us the video and prove me wrong. We're never going to see that video. And I believe that is the reason they picked these places where the people in charge have ties to the FBI. Because the FBI can step right in and squelch any type of an investigation. If they can cover up a shooting the size of Vegas, they can cover up anything, and they are. So let's say that these shootings are being at least winked at by our FBI. Let's take a look at some of the possible solutions. I mean, how do you stop them? Well, the first one is we could just capitulate and give them our guns. That's a solution. Or is it? If we voluntarily gave up all of our guns, do you think they would really stop killing us? Because then it would be easy for them to kill us. We couldn't fight back. You don't go to a gunfight with a knife. It's a solution, but it's not a good one. We could have stricter gun control laws. That would be a solution. But as I said earlier, you can't legislate for criminals. If they broke 50 laws getting to where they were, one more law is not going to stop them. Now, we could have security guards in our schools. We could have We should have had, and they did have actually, security guards in Vegas at all the hotels, which just begs the question. I mean, there was cops in that hotel, the Mandalay Bay. There was police officers in there when it happened, and yet it took them 90 minutes to break down the door. So security guards are only as good as the people doing the guarding. And if the FBI is in charge, having security guards is really not an option. We could have cameras. Oh, wait a minute. We did. So having cameras really is not an option. I mean, it's a possible solution. I mean, you could put more cameras up, but is that going to do any good? Vegas has got more cameras per square inch than any place on the planet, and we haven't seen one video. We could put police substations in our public schools. With the age of computers and cell phones, the communication part, which is one of the reasons that police stations are so concentrated in one building for the communication, but with computers and cell phones, not so much. So what if we took in our public schools and we took 5 officers per school and built them their own office on the school campus, and that would be their police station, and they would wear uniforms, they'd park their cars, that would be where they went to report for their jobs, and they would rotate around to the different stations. So if you've got 50 officers and 10 public schools, you put 2 or 3 in each school, and you keep the administrative staff at the main police office. That's a workable option. We could arm the teachers. That has a lot of benefits, in my opinion. I don't think it should be mandatory, but I think you should give the teachers the option. And for the ones that take the option, they should get more pay. We should pay for their gun, for their ammunition, for their annual target practice and qualification, and for their training, and give them extra in their paycheck every week. In my opinion, that is a very workable solution. We could homeschool our children. I like that one. Public education in the United States is supposed to be a local issue. It's not supposed to be a warehouse where we throw our kids 8 hours a day to get them out of our hair and hopefully get them educated. But that's what it's become. It's become a concrete babysitter. I think we should start homeschooling our kids whenever possible and use the public schools as a last resort, because frankly, our public school system is turning into a last resort. We could have undercover cops and guards so that they weren't visible, because one of the arguments the leftists use is we don't want to traumatize the kids by having them be with armed guards all day. Okay. Put them in t-shirts and jeans and have them be undercover. We could start limiting access to our public places. As an example, in schools, any school building you go to has got multiple entrances and exits. You could lock them all, board them all up, and have one main entrance. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the next possible solution. That's put metal detectors at the entrances. If you didn't want to, if it was impractical to have one main entrance, then have 2 or 3 entrances, but have metal detectors at each one, and each one armed by a security guard, armed security guard, so that if somebody did walk in or try to bum rush, there would be somebody there qualified to take them down. Now, here's some possible long-term solutions that nobody wants to talk about. Instead of gun control, let's have child control. What do I mean? I don't think it's any coincidence that the shootings that we've seen started in earnest probably 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. Wait a minute, is that about the same time that video games, violent video games, came on the scene? The more you watch something, the more immunized you are to it. Ask any porn addict and they will tell you. The more you watch, the more immune you become to it, the more inoculated against it. So when we watch TV shows and we see people getting killed, after a while, watching a cop show doesn't really shock you anymore. But when you think about that represents people getting killed, it should mean something. And I think it's the same. Now, adults are able to, as a rule, distinguish between reality and non-reality. But anybody that's ever had kids knows that when they watch shows on TV, kids have a hard time distinguishing between what's real and what's not. And if they grow up playing video games where the cops are the bad guys and they kill women, and then they kill each other on a regular daily basis for 6 hours a day, every day, why are we surprised when they go get a real gun and it doesn't seem to bother them to go kill all these people? Because they've been doing it in their head for 20 years through a video game. I also don't think it's any coincidence that corporal punishment in our schools went away and bad behavior came in. Kids, in a lot of ways, are like pets. They need to be trained. They have to learn how to get along in society. They have to learn right from wrong, good from bad. When kids don't have those boundaries, are what we have in society now is what happens. You know, corporal punishment in our schools is, in my opinion, should be mandatory. I was told when I was a kid, and I told my kids when I raised kids, if you get into trouble at school, you're going to get double that trouble when you get home. And when my 2 oldest were in school, every year I would go see the teacher. And I told the teacher, and I said it in front of my kids, you have my permission to use corporal punishment on my kids. I want them to behave. They need to learn how to behave. And if corporal punishment does it, I'll put it in writing. You have my permission. I also don't think it's any coincidence that school violence and institutional violence happened when the leftists started taking God out and prayer out. I don't think that's a coincidence. Why would we how could we possibly ask God to watch over our children when we kick him out of school? That makes no sense at all. If the children can't pray in school, then how can we possibly expect them to be protected? God's not going to answer those prayers. We need to put God back in our school system. We need to put God back in our government. We need to put God back in all of our public buildings. We need God back in charge. When man gets in charge, these are the types of problems we have. Another thing that we could do in the line of child control is to start teaching our children traditional values. Instead of rushing to teach them about LBGT, whatever, XMNOP rights, how about let's teaching them about the Bible, about a family unit, a mother, a father, and a child. You know, not two women and a kid, not two daddies and a kid, not, traditional American values. One mother, one father, and children in one home where daddy works and mom raises the kids. Traditional values. Do you think that might, if we went back to traditional values and corporal punishment and put a lot more control on the video game content, and then at home controlled or eliminated the video game playing, do you think if we did that with our kids, do you think we might have a little bit better behavior from our youth? I don't think there's any doubt at all about that. I think that's absolutely right. Now, of those solutions that I just went over, which one is the best? Who knows? I think that a combination of those will work depending on the school. Let me give you an example. I think if you lived out west, I think arming the teachers is probably is got to be one of the best choices in combination with the others. Why? Because the population is so spread out that it would take the cops a long time to get to a specific place. So the time factor could be eliminated by having the teachers armed. Putting a sub police station in one of those rural areas doesn't make any sense because, again, it's so sparsely populated that the tax base probably wouldn't warrant enough police officers to do that. I think in every instance, homeschooling is a good option, rural or city. But let's talk about what about the city? I think the police substation is a good alternative. I think limiting access to the buildings themselves is a good choice. I think arming the teachers is a bad choice because a lot of times the students are a lot bigger than the teachers. And when you have a high concentration of that, I think the danger is would put the teachers more in a dangerous position than if you had armed guards there. So in the inner city and the overpopulated areas, arming the teachers is probably not a good idea. But a police substation, limiting access, using metal detectors, and possibly security guards, undercover security guards. But I think these are a combination of fixes for the problems, and each one would be a different fix depending on the situation of the school, the size of the school, the size of the student body, the number of schools, the number of guards, the tax base, all of those things taken into account would dictate the fix for any particular school. So now, having taken a look at that, I want to ask questions about things that we should be thinking about instead of thinking what the press wants us to think. Instead of being a sheeple, let's think outside the box for a minute and let's ask some questions and let's think about some other things. As an example, should we even have public schools? Now, it's a drastic thing, but what if tomorrow the federal government closed down every public school in the country and left the education up to the parents? And you say, well, how would we do that if we work? Well, all of a sudden you'd have a lot of out of work teachers, right? If we close the public schools, we have billions of dollars freed up in every state in the union. Our taxes on our property taxes would go down. Our state income taxes would go down. So that would free up money for us to hire our own teacher. Or we could homeschool. But the question and the thought I want you to think about is, should we even have public schools? Here's another thing to think about. What if tomorrow we put God back in every public building and we started teaching the Bible like we did back before we got civilized? Every school was required to have one class on the Bible, and the children went there every day from kindergarten through college. One class a day on the Bible. Wouldn't that be awesome? Instead of having them spend 1 hour a day playing violent video games, we have them spend 1 hour a day reading God's Word. Might change their perspective over time. Here's another possible solution, and I think this is really going to happen. But what if in every city we closed down the public schools, the kids stayed at home, and instead of playing video games, we had school done on computer, where we would have one teacher in a central location on a video, and every morning at 8 o'clock, the teacher would come in and have class. And instead of having 25 unruly children she had to teach, she had 25,000 that was watching her and participating at home on a computer. You don't think that's possible? I think that's very possible. I believe that'll happen. Think of the money savings. Think of the number of violence that would happen. You say, well, the kids wouldn't go to school. Well, we would be able to tell who's there and who's not because they have to log on. If they're not logged on, we know. You say, okay, so they log in and then go away. If we can find a way to put cameras in our computers and be worried about the government spying on us, don't you think we could figure out a way to make sure those kids are sitting in front of that computer doing the work? I'm not a computer guy. I don't know. But I know, I'm pretty sure that that's coming. That will be a thing. Here's another thing I want you to think about. And this is saying it in a blunt way, what I said at the beginning of this video. Here's the question. Is our government killing our kids to get rid of guns? I mean, if they're in charge of this and the FBI is behind this, that's exactly what they're doing. They're killing our kids. The government is killing our kids to get rid of guns. If that's true, and I'm saying it is, what do? How do you stop an overgrown government that has the power to do whatever they want whenever they want? But think about that. Is our government killing our kids to get rid of guns? And here's another question to think about. Why is no video ever released in any of these events? No video ever released. And we know that every one of them was on video, without question. But there's never been video released. Why? You know, if it happens once, you think, okay, could be extenuating circumstances, could be something we don't know about, could be, and you make excuses. When it happens 2 times in a row, you're like, well, that's kind of fishy, you know, but whatever. And then when it happens a 3rd time and you've got all of these people now dead and our government is not releasing any video. Why? There's something in those videos that we are not supposed to see. I don't know what it is, but because they haven't released it, we are all free to speculate. And if the government doesn't like what we're speculating, why don't they just release it and prove us wrong? And the interesting thing that I'm going to find is that these shooters, we've caught the last 2. So we've been told. When they go to trial, if they go to trial, what proof is going to be given? And will any of that be released? And let's say that they do it in a closed court so the proof can't get out. Let's just assume they do that. That still means that there's a judge, 2 attorneys, the person on trial, and anybody else that has to be there that will know the truth. When that many people know the truth, things happen. So it's going to be very interesting to me to see if and when these people go to trial. Again, if one of them commits suicide while in prison, you think, well, you know, stuff happens. But if both of them commit suicide, that's going to be a big red flag. Here's something else to think about. Should we make all public schools private? What if tomorrow we could get up and we could put every school building in the country up for sale? Again, taxes would go down. Savings to the government would be tremendous every year, billions and billions and billions of dollars, state and federal. And then the schools would become private. Do you think a private school is going to try to compete to get your children? Do you think they might want to increase their own security to try to draw you to bring your kids to them? What if we made all public schools private schools? Let's get the government out of educating or indoctrinating our kids, and let's leave it to the people that really should be doing it, and that's the teachers. Here's another thing to think about. Are video games responsible for the breakdown of the family? I think it's a contributing factor, but I think our society as a whole is responsible for the breakdown of family values. And I don't think there's any doubt at all. Even the most liberal person has to look at the family unit in this country and say it's nowhere near what it used to be. The breakdown of the family unit in this country is unprecedented. And the breakdown of family values is easily proven. The question is, what caused it? And I think people have written books on it, but it's pretty easy for the average person to look back over the last 20 or 30 years, which I can, and make some very easy deductions. The policy of the left has always been to tear down. They never build up. They tear down our society. Abortion, homosexual rights. It's not a right. Public education. All of the things that the left pushes has contributed to the breakdown in our society, without question. Make a list. Here's an exercise for you. Make a list of the beliefs that the left has. Now, once you do that, you ask yourself, did this help or did this break down the family values that we had in the 50s and 60s? And even the 70s. The 70s was the beginning. I want to end by saying I think that I've made my case that these last three events were false flags, orchestrated, I believe, by the federal government, FBI specifically. At the very least, the FBI is responsible for covering them up. If they didn't plan them, if they didn't do it themselves, they participated in the covering up of those events. And I don't think there's any question at all about that. The question is, are we going to permit that to continue to happen? Or at what point are the American people going to rise up and get rid of the federal government control over being able to kill our kids to try to get us to get rid of our guns? Now, here's a possible solution. I believe that Donald Trump or a president at some point needs to go through every law enforcement area in the federal government, and from the supervisor position all the way to the secretary, fire them all and start over. Fire everybody in any position of authority so that these things are not done and planned anymore. Or we could just eliminate the departments themselves totally. Now, the federal government without a CIA leaves us vulnerable, and I get that. But We need to get rid of the people, the bad people that are doing these things. And if you can't put your finger on who they are, then you know that they have to be in positions of authority, so eliminate those positions of authority. Now, whenever I end one of these programs, I like to talk about current events, and there's only really two I wanted to talk about uh, this week. And one of them, uh, as a conservative, I was extremely happy to see, and of course, the press gave this very little, if any, airplay. But Donald Trump issued an executive order that passed Title 10, uh, which means, and the way that it was worded was not Planned Parenthood. It was any organization that participates in or does abortions gets no federal funding. Now, I'm pretty sure I know how Planned Parenthood is going to get around this. Planned Parenthood has two divisions. My guess is they're dividing right now the abortion part from the advisory part, the health clinic part. And the health clinic part is going to get the funding, and the abortion part will not. That's how they're going to try to get the money. I hope Trump doesn't allow that to happen. But the good news is Title 10 got passed, which means defunding of Planned Parenthood. It's awesome. That happened this week. And the other main event that I wanted to talk about in current events was the on again, off again talks with North Korea. And just to bring you up to speed, they set June 12th. I think I covered this last week. They set June 12th as a date for them to meet in Singapore, I believe. I won't swear to that, but I believe that's where it is, June 12th. So Kim Jong Un started running his mouth about the war games, just like he does every year, that the United States and South Korea were having. And Donald Trump sent him a letter this week and said, you know what? With all the nasty things that you've said, it really is not in the best interest of the United States or uh, Korea to meet and talk when there's obviously a lot of hate for Americans coming from your side of the table. And then he ended it very diplomatically by saying, but it would be in the best interest of all parties and the world if we were to sit down and talk about things. And he left it open. That was on Monday or Tuesday. Within the 24 hours, Kim Jong Un was back and saying, "Oh, I didn't mean that. I do want to sit down. I do want us to meet." So Trump hasn't committed to it as of he's played it up very well for the week. Um, he's now Trump is saying it's possible we could still meet, um, but the commentators this week were saying that Kim Jong Un just got educated in the art of the deal. Because if you read The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump, you have to be able to walk away from any deal, any negotiation. You have to show the other person that you're willing to walk away. And that's what Trump did by issuing the letter. He walked away from the deal. And he said, if we meet, great. If we don't, that's great too. But left the door open saying, if you come back and do what I want you to do, then we'll meet. So Kim Jong Un got educated in the art of the deal, which was great. And again, on again, off again. Do they meet? Will they meet? Who cares? I really don't. We really have very little to gain. I mean, the big thing is going to be his nuclear weapons, and if we can get verifiable out of there, great. But here's what I say: we supposedly had Syria uh, under Russia's watch get rid of all of their chemical weapons. They made a big thing out of it. They gathered them all together. They put them on ships. They shipped them out. I mean, it was a big ordeal, right? Then how come he's still using chemical weapons on his people? I mean, a, a deal is only as good as the people you're making the deal with. And North Korea has a long history of lying and cheating on any deal they make. They've never kept their word with us on any deal. So I don't really hold out any hope. I mean, if we get rid of some of their nuclears, okay, it might be worth it. I think I heard a better solution to the thing is rather than worry about him having nuclear weapons, let's let the United States put nuclear weapons in the hands of the other governments around there. South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, any place where he can hit, we'll just give him the nukes. Let everybody have nuclear weapons, and that way nobody has an advantage. Now, the bad part to that part is when there's that many nuclear weapons around, then terrorists get their hands on them. So the best is to go in there and get rid of all of his nuclears. And if we can do that, that'd be great. If we get rid of a large percentage, that'd be equally as great. Well, that covers current events. And this week we looked at the things that are in common for the false flags, the last 3 false flags. Now, just an announcement before we go. This program and all the programs that we do with the Right Wing Reverend and Bible teachings and Bible class and all of that, all of those programs are produced by Prayer Box Ministry. And you can find us on the web. If you'd like to know a little bit more about who we are and what we do, you can find us online at prayerboxministry.org. That's org.org. Go over there and take a look at our site. That website was designed to be an interactive website. Our programs are over there. There's some blogs that you can read. You can join a prayer group. You can have somebody read the Bible to you. I mean, there's a lot going on over there. Go check us out on prayerboxministry.org. Well, that's it for this week in politics. I hope you have a blessed week. I look forward to next week when we can sit down and talk about this week in politics.